All right, we're back, and it's COMP1011, Advanced Object-Oriented Programming, and it's week 12, lesson 12, and this is part 1 of our video series. All right, so let's talk about this new project that we're going to be doing today, or we're going to be giving you today anyway. It's up on Blackboard if you want to look at there, and it's called Project 1. It's worth 20% of your marks. This is kind of the biggest one you've done so far. What I'm allowing you to do is you can work on your own or with a partner on this one. All right, for obvious reasons. We're in a time crunch right now, okay? And we want to try and get this stuff done. I need you guys to know about these things, but I don't want to overload you with things that you can't possibly do on your own. And also, you have other projects that you're working on. You have that big project you're doing for me in the other class. So I want you to be able to partner. This is not a 4-week project that I'm giving you. This is like a couple-week project you can do, but it's definitely going to be in addition to what you're doing other courses, like my other course, right? So I don't want to overload you, and because of that, I'm allowing you to work with somebody else, okay? If you choose to. If you choose to work on your own, because you're a solo kind of guy or girl, for the people that are working online, that's perfectly acceptable. It's up to you what you want to do, okay? So here's the the app in a nutshell. So you're either working alone or in a group, 2 students max. Create an Android game app that tests the user's memory. Include a 4x4 grid of 16 playing cards that are face down. So it's a little card concentration game. Showing the back of the card. When the user touches the back of the playing card, a random card is revealed. The user then touches the back of another playing card to find a match with the same card. If the 2 cards do not match, the cards are flipped back to the back side. If the 2 cards match, the user gets a point and the cards are removed from the screen. The game should keep track of the user's score. The game gives the user 30 seconds to accumulate the highest score. When the timer runs out, the user is asked if he wants to reset the game, and the playing card images for this game are included in the sample files on Blackboard. So if you go to Blackboard, you'll see some images, and all the card images for you, there's a bunch of other files too I'm going to show you in a sec too, that are also included to help you build this bloody app. Right? So this is a build exercise, putting things together to make this go, as opposed to building it and doing all the logic on your own, right? So I'm going to give you some of the logic up front. Okay, so these are all the images for the cards. I've kind of put together these images for you, and I've cut them up, and I've named them in a certain way. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's look at each piece part for this thing. So create a UI that includes the following components, right? 16 image buttons. These are actual objects or controls that you can add into Android. Image buttons. 16 image buttons of card backs, we're going to talk about what the card backs are initially displayed on the screen in a 4x4 grid. Okay, so you got to figure out what kind of layout do I need for that. You could use different kinds of layouts to give you this 4x4 grid, right? A text view of the top of the screen will display a message to the user, pick a card, any card, right? A text view at the top of the screen displays the user's score, initially set to 0. Right? The text view at the top of the screen displays the countdown. Now, if you notice, I didn't tell you where on the top of the screen to put it. I'll let you do that on your own. You can decide your style of what the thing looks like. And if you decide to put it at the bottom of the screen because you feel it looks better there from a game perspective, all the power to you, brothers and sisters. Right? It displays a countdown. So it initially starts at 30 seconds and it counts down to 0. When it comes down to 0, game is over. Right? 8 cards from the 52 card deck, only 8 cards, will be randomly selected, and 2 images of each card will be placed at random locations on the grid and only revealed when the user clicks a card back. Right? A glowing image border will appear for the first card that is selected. This could be an alternate image if you wish, so you can replace the image, or you can add some kind of special effect on your own. That's worth 1 mark UI and 2 marks functionality for that. When the user has selected his first card, the text view at the top of the screen will change its message to now pick another card, right? The user then makes a second selection. If the second selection matches the first, the score is updated by 1 point. The text view at the top of the screen says right, and then both cards become invisible. Notice how I said they don't go away. I didn't tell you to remove the cards. I said make them invisible, right? This is the key to this trick that we're going to use for this game, right? If the card is not the same as the first, the text view displays wrong, pick again. And the second card the user chose flips over again, right? The user can deselect his original card choice if he presses it a second time. All right, that's another piece of functionality. The user continues making choices until the timer runs out. When the timer runs out, the user final score is displayed in an alert dialog. We'll talk about what that is. And a play again button is displayed in the dialog that allows the user to reset the game. Right? Do you want to play again? Kind of thing. There's some internal documentation that you need to do, as normal. This piece has an external component. And this is why two people working on this thing is good, right? It's somewhat similar to making our external components that we do with the game on the gaming side. If you haven't done that before, all I need you to do is put together a document that says, here's the company logo, a brief description of your app, a sketch of what this thing is going to look like, which is a wireframe, right? Not a screenshot. That's something different. And that's all you need. There's no GitHub component to this one. I recommend you use GitHub because if you're working with a partner, I'd like to see your commits. And what I'm probably going to say here is when you submit your work, your external document is your MS Word or PDF file, a zip archive of your Android project files, or I recommend GitHub as a preferred place to show me. You've got your rubric down here and everything else, and this thing again is worth 20% of your final mark. Why am I making it so heavy? I don't want your exam to be heavier. That's why. Because right now we're sitting at about 65%, right, in that range with what I've given you so far. If I give you 20, if I make this 20 or something like that, I think your exam will be worth like 15 or 20. You see what I'm saying? So I'm trying to cut down the exam so it's not too insane for you. So I'm going to give you a project that's giving you an opportunity to work with somebody else, learn about Android, and then make it so that the exam is, fairly straightforward. You have other things going on in the same week, right? So that way you don't kill yourself. All right. There will be a practical component to your exam. I'll try and add in some other piece parts. So it's not all practical, right? Because you only have 3 hours. So I'll probably put one piece that'll be some question answer, multiple choice, and then the last piece will be practical piece that you have to take care of for the second half. Again, that's going to happen in 2 weeks from now, so it's not so far off, and that's why this assignment is due on the Friday at midnight, the same time that your other assignment is due, right? But there's no presentation for this one, right? So this is just a straight to-do assignment, and then you're done. You can hand this in, and once it's done, I'll mark it, and you're away you go. Any questions around this thing? Okay, so this is neat that I've given you this, but what do I mean by all this stuff? What do I want it kind of to look like? Well, I've kind of prepared a sample for you. I'm going to bring up my Eclipse so you can see what there's a couple ways of approaching this problem, and I'm going to give you some code. If you look up online, you don't just get the document anymore. You get your images and you get some other stuff too. So this is an example. I call this my image view demo. And I'm using Android 2.3.3 here, but it doesn't really matter.
This is on Blackboard?
No. I'm going to show you what this looks like first. So I'm going to run my image view demo. Here's my image view demo that I'm going to make run. Bear with me while I launch this application. 0 attempts to be made to reconnect. Want to manually restart ADB from the devices being made? Sure. Yeah, we'll just run it like this. There we go. So I'm going to launch my app here, and if you notice, my app is launching in Nexus 1 because it's a version that's 2.3.3. It doesn't matter. It's something that I developed, before, and I want to bring it into this today. But I'm using an older version of the OS. Your app will look better than mine, guaranteed. So let's take a look. Here it's pulled up. If I open up this thing, I wait till this thing installs the activity, and here's what it looks like. So here's almost the completed game. Okay, take a look. It says pick a card, any card, right? My counter's going. I pick the first card, I pick the second card. They're not the same. I pick the first card, I pick the second card. They're not the same. Pick the first card, pick the second card. They're not the same, right? And if I pick the cards that are the same, right? If you notice, there's a bit of a delay, right? One thing I shouldn't be able to do is this. Like, and all the cards show up. That's bad. I should be able to pick the first card, pick the second card, and I should have a chance to do it. Now, if you notice, it's done, right? Because I haven't been able to reset. So a pop-up should come up in this point that says, hey, you're done. Do you want to continue? Do you want to play again? But if you notice, if I just play on, if I go 4 and Jack, or 5 and Jack, here's Jacks. Here's 2 Jacks. Look, here's a Jack, this Jack, and this Jack. If I click them both, they both disappear, right? And if I go do this, if I say a king and a king, well, it's 2 different kings. Let's see, a 4. I think it was 4 was down here, no? Let's say 4. Here's the 2 4s. So here's my 4s. Now I'm way gone. My game is done, right? I'm not going to get any more points, right? But if you notice, I'm gonna keep playing, and it's going to keep scoring me. Now, typically my game should be over, but this is the part of the game right here. So how did I do all this stuff, right? Well, these are all image buttons. So they're images, right? But they're actually buttons. So when I click on the button, they have an event handler that fires, right? And they do, they basically calculate if, the first card and the second card, if it's the same one. That's all it does. Okay, so this is the way I did it. And if you want to look at the methodology, right? I'm just going to bring up my resources. And if I go to layout for a second, let's take a look at this. Well, here's my layout. If you notice, I've got a mixed bag of layouts here. Take a look, guys, for a second. I got a mixed layout for this one. I've got a top linear layout. Inside that, I have a user message text view. Underneath that, there's a column linear layout. Underneath that, I've got a bunch of text views. Underneath that, I've got another column linear layout. And then in there, I have a row linear layout for each one of these things. Right? So I've got a bunch of different layouts that I used to make this work. Okay? Now again, we talked about this earlier, but you can nest layouts within layouts and so on within layouts for you to make all this stuff go. All right. Part of the technology is I want to give you a couple of different examples. And one of them is if I was to look at the bare bones code in here, I use the code in here to make things go. I have an array list that I use. And in my array list, I generate a random number. And I basically take I add these 2 selected cards into something I call my deck of cards, right? I remove the random card that I take from my 52 deck of cards, right? And then what I do is I take my selected cards, card selected, which is my array list, right? And I use the shuffle method of the collections class to shuffle it for me. That's what I'm doing, right? So that's how I do the card shuffling algorithm. Well, guess what? I'm giving you all that stuff. And if you look up online, you have this thing called card memory game, right? So you don't have to figure out the logic to this at all. You just have to make it work. If I look at cardmemorygame.java, here it is. Take a look, right? It has all that stuff. It has my array list. It picks the card suit, C, D, H, and S, and so on. And it does that random card altogether. You got to figure out how do I get it from this with my algorithm here to pick an object that's inside of my resource, inside of my resources. Now remember, I named the images a certain way. I named them so that it's a logical naming progression. So let's take a look at some of these card images for a second. I'm just going to unzip them here for a second so you can see them. So here's the card images. Look, I've got card _1C. What would that be? Well, that's pretty simple. It is a 1 of clubs, right, and so on. And if you look through all these, each of these has the same coding convention. They're all ping files, so you can always use these. And there's the card back, right? So you've got all the resources you need to make your game. All right, so that's one. So one is you're getting this thing called card memory game. If I run the card memory game for a second, let me just run this thing. I get this. Enter the first memory location, right? And I put in memory location 1. Okay, what's the second memory location? 2. Well, it says the first memory location is card 4S, which is a 4 of spades. And the second one is card 1D, which is a 1 of diamonds. They don't match. Try again. Okay, let's try 1 and 3. Here's a card 4S, a 4 of spades and a 6 of spades. Okay, they don't match. Okay, let's try again. So I'm going to try 1 and 4. A 4 of spades and a 2 of diamonds. So this, and again, every time I run this program, it's going to select a new group of 8 cards that it's going to be. So it's going to be different every time, right? And I give you the shuffling algorithm and everything else right here in this memory game. It's only Java you're getting here. All right, so there is no Android here. This is pure Java. I've created my own little function to do that, method, if you will, within this card memory game class. That's all this thing is. All right, so you've got this piece that I'm giving you. All right, what if instead of doing layouts, like the way we're doing it, what if you wanted to programmatically do layouts? Well, I've given you that as well. So what if I don't want to do my layouts with XML whatsoever? I want everything to be programmed. So my XML document is empty. Can I do that? Absolutely you can with Android. And this is what I've given you this other thing called coded layout. I call it a coded, it's my name for what this thing is. I'm going to make a coded layout as opposed to, so it's programmatically done as opposed to done with XML. I'm not dragging and dropping anything here. Let's take a look at this project for really quickly. So again, I got this resource directory, and inside there I've got a layout, and I've got my main XML. What's in my main XML? Let's take a look. Do you see anything in my main XML? It be blank, baby. I've got a relative layout, and that's it. That's all. Let's run this app. So I'm going to go here to run the app. Let's see if I'm running this properly. So I'm going to escape from this for a second. And I'm going to just run it in the right perspective. So this is my coded layout. Let's see if it launches. There it is. Here's my coded layout. There's nothing like that on the screen. But I got all these buttons that come up. Right? I made these buttons appear programmatically. I've given my own layout. Watch. If I click this button here, plus, 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 it increases the number here to this one, this one, this one, this one, all these other ones. I can put as many as I want, and I can reduce them, the numbers. These are all a layout. If you notice, how many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, and 1, 2, 3 columns of pluses and minuses. Right? I did that programmatically, which means you can do the same thing with your card backs if you really wish. You don't have to use a complicated layout. And if you notice, it's pretty cool, eh? You don't have to do anything. There's no XML whatsoever in this layout. Well, except for the relative layout that's part of. How did I do it? Well, I've got all the code right here. If you look at source inside your document, if I go to coded layout, it shows you what I did. Here's my onCreate method, and inside here I create my layout. I say, here's my linear layout. I create an object of type context. And I'm saying, you know what, this, which is pointing to the app, is my context. I've created a context object, right? This is kind of neat. You can do this in Java, right? And what you're going to do now is you're going to say, my linear layout is a new linear layout, and I'm passing in the context. I could actually pass in the keyword this, but sometimes you want it to make it so that it's a class level variable, because I'm passing it into, sometimes I'm passing into some kind of event listener, and you need a context to be passed in there that's at class level as opposed to this, because this has a different context inside of an event listener. Okay, that's why I'm passing it in like this. So here's my context, and I create my linear layout, and then I set the orientation to my linear layout to vertical. I set the gravity to center horizontal, so all my stuff is going to be in the center, and I programmatically patch out how my layout's going to be as opposed to using XML. So I'm giving you a couple of options. You don't have to use XML like I did. I'm giving you this linear layout code that you can look at, try and understand this and absorb, and maybe this would be the right way to set up your game. Here's something. I've got this shared event listener that I'm using. This is interesting. Just like we do shared event listeners or shared event handlers in C#, you can do the same thing with Java, right? If you look down here, I have this inner kind of on-click listener right here that I've created. And basically what I'm doing is my buttons, it's a multi-dimensional array that I'm using to say, depending on which button is pressed, right? This view, I'm passing in the view for the button, and depending on which button is pressed, I'm going to update my view. That's really what this is doing. And I've got a label text view, right? And it's a multi-dimensional, I'm using a multi-dimensional array, and I'm basically setting the text to the string value of the button, which is +1, +2, +3. That's why when I increase my buttons, I do it all here. This label text view set text method, I'm using this to set any button. If I click the button, any one of those buttons will increase the value of the label that's associated with it. So a shared event handler, right? I'm showing you this because I want you to be certain that you could avoid the XML headache that you get with Android by doing everything programmatically. Most people don't do this because this is hard-coded. This is instead of a relative layout, this is almost like an absolute. I'm putting things with my relative layout, but I'm programming everything in. It's hard-coded, right? And some people don't like that. Now, how will my app respond when I change my orientation? That's a totally different story. and you can test that out for yourself. How did I incorporate this? If I want to include these example projects into your Eclipse, how do I do that? And because you're going to have to try and do that to understand how this works. Well, you use the import option. Let's try and do that. So if I wanted to include this card memory game into my project space, my workspace, I would go File, Import. I know that this is not an Android project. It's just a regular Eclipse project. So I would say Existing Projects into Workspace. And then I would point at where my project would live. Not the actual files itself, just the project folder. And then it would add it into your Eclipse. So if you go up on Blackboard, I've got these projects in there for you. I've got the sample memory game project, and I also have the coded layout project in there. If you want to try it out and incorporate it into your Eclipse, you can do that now by going import. For the memory game, it's only under general, you would say existing projects into workspace. For the coded layout, it's an Android application, so you would, under Android, you would say existing Android code into workspace. Those are the two options. And then you'd be able to get these two projects, the coded layout, as well as the card memory game piece parts in here, right? Now I've got another one. This is my image view that I was working on to make this work for today, and this is something that I had that was existing that kind of patched out something that I could show you to see the functionality a little bit as an example, as opposed to having nothing to go on. Okay. Any questions around this? So again, this is due 2 weeks from now. It's due on the Friday of the last day of class. So that's April 17th at midnight or before midnight, 11:59. Okay? You can work on your own or with a group, like in a group of 2. If you decide to work with a group of 2, I would like to see your Git commits, like I do for other courses, right? So even though Git isn't a requirement here for this project, for me to show that there's equal partnership here, that both of you guys are working on this thing, I want to see your commit history. That's one of the requirements that, even though it's not on here, I'd like to see it. If you're working on your own, I don't need to see that because you're working on your own, right? So I'm not going to make it a requirement to have Git involved. It's worth 20% of your grade, like I said, so please don't let this go. This is a big chunk of it. And again, I'm trying to make it so that your exam is easier, right? That's the whole idea here. Some of you may like this. Some of you may feel overwhelmed with the amount of work you have right now. There really isn't a better solution, to be honest with you. The exam would be much worse for you if I made it worth 40% of the work, right?
This is perfect.
Yeah, I'm trying to make it so that it's a little easier for everybody. So no questions? I can shut this one down? Okay, I'm shutting it down.
Yeah, question, sorry.
For this one?
Blackboard?
Yeah. It's all on Blackboard right now.